Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I already feel at home. I don't know why. Maybe Ron has some answers. I believe we are both coming from Morocco. I was born in Morocco, so that's the reason. We are, warm inside. So, what I would like to do in my next 5 hours is to connect the dots that probably you are all familiar with those dots. But it takes time for all of us as human beings to connect dots in a way that makes sense. In a way that makes sense before things are really, clear to everybody. And if it's clearer to you before everybody else, I hope you understand the important thing that might be just by that very simple fact. So, what I would like to emphasize in my talk is something that is probably very, very important that is happening at this very moment, and not a lot of people worldwide are aware of its impact on the future. Okay, I'm going to concentrate on those two nations that are going to play a crucial role in the coming 2 to 3 decades in world stage. And I hope by the end you'll see how Israel and India are connected in ways that we are not still understand at this point of time in human history. Because really, we have started a new age in human history. A new age in which everything is going to be different in the next century. And the more we understand it earlier, the more the better for all of us. I would like to try and answer those 3 questions, okay? A lot of people are speaking about globalization, but it seems to be that the way globalization has developed in the last century is over, and something else is in the making. The better we understand it, the better we will take the opportunities that are coming with it. Okay, I'm going to concentrate, as I said, on the Chinese strategy, on this globalization that is emerging, and then I'm going to concentrate on the strategies that India is doing. At the end, I'll show you how we are interconnected. By we, I mean Israel and India. So let's start. Okay, these are the chapters I'm going to cover in my 10 hours, okay? But I'll try to do it in 45 minutes. You know, the problem with human beings is that we really don't see reality. We think we see reality. In order to see reality, we need a framework, a theoretical framework. If you wish, glasses. There is no such a thing as seeing reality. There is no such a thing. Our mind is built in a way that we have, let's say, technologies with which we see the reality, and those technologies are just glasses. Okay? So I'm going to show you very briefly the theoretical framework with which I'm going to try and understand what's going to happen in the 21st century. Bear in mind, the moment I decided with which theoretical framework I'm going to try and perceive reality, I already decided what kind of reality is going to be perceived. So if I'll take another theoretical framework, I might see reality in a very different way. But I would like to introduce you, if you're not still familiar with, a very important theoretical framework that used to be very dominant at the early stage of the 20th century. Now it's coming back to stage, and it helps us a lot to understand what might happen in the future. As you see, this is what we call the heart of Earth. Most of the people are sitting in what we call that blue area. That red area is where all our resources are somehow concentrated. By the way, at that place, okay, what you see here, excuse me, back. All right, what you see here is the center of humanity. Okay, most of humans actually are living in that spot. This is a very nice study that was just published a couple years ago. So most of humanity is concentrated nearby human resources, the heart of human resources. And for millennia, humans were competing around this area in order to be close to resources. And of course, make use of those resources and trade with those resources. This is a very old theory that was developed by Mahan, and it has, just people forgot about it in the 20th century because of a lot of things. Now it's coming back to stage. Okay? So another person that really spoke about it a lot was Mackinder, and he tried to understand what drives conflicts in history around, of course, resources. Now, conflicts are not just around resources, but this theory was trying to understand conflicts around just resources. All right? I have written a book that I was trying to take a lot of studies, a lot of theories, combine them together in order to try and see if I can a little bit understand the vector of those theories into mid, at least, 21st century. We will send you that book digitally, of course, and I hope you'll have the chance to a little bit read it. I'm going to discuss other issues that I did not discuss in that book. That book was published in 2010, and in that book I was able, with those kind of theories, to perceive and actually predict Russia going into Ukraine. I was able to predict, the Arab world going to upheavals. I was trying to predict how technologies and what kind of technologies are going to develop, etc., etc. I hope you'll have the chance to go over it. I'm going to take some of my ideas today also from that book. So, by just summarizing those theories, I would like to a little bit explain how we understand, based on those theories, how globalization is going to change. And there is a lot of discussion now in the futuristic literature about what I'm going to discuss now. It's not clear yet to everybody that this is what will happen, but at least I'm going to introduce you to the basic ideas how globalization is probably going to develop. Okay? Now, human beings have always been, competing, and in that competition, they were always killing each other. And time after time, we were trying to stop those vicious cycles of atrocities. And time after time, humanity tried different ways, to stop those vicious cycles. The idea for millennia was that if you have something, somebody else lack those resources. Okay? That was the theory of abundance vs scarcity. And we were competing about who's going to have those resources. All right? After World War II, a bunch of people said, we need to stop. We need to stop killing each other. I don't know if you remember how many people were killed in World War II. About 72 million people worldwide. Two-thirds civilians. In World War II, World War I, there were about 32 million people killed. Okay? A third civilians. The 20th century was really cruel for humanity. Okay? And humanity has developed tools that can kill millions of people. Now we have tools to kill billions of people. So we need to stop that vicious cycle of competition. After World War II, there were some people that said, let's replace that paradigm with another paradigm. Let's try to bring all resources to everybody on Earth. And maybe we'll be able to stop that vicious cycle of cruelty. And the idea was, okay, let's develop a world order, a world system that can bring everything to everybody based on some trade agreement, some international institutions that will manage and develop those agreements, etc., etc. The problem is that in order to sustain that order, you needed to police that agreement. So the US took upon itself the role to be the policeman of that world order. By policing, I mean, taking care of the supply chains, taking care of technologies with which we'll be able to manage, the transfer of resources and ideas from place to place, etc. We are all familiar of what happened, at least in the last 50 years. And the basic assumption was, if you sign an agreement, a global agreement with each other through amazing institutions that we have built, for example, the World Trade Organization, then we will stop wars. And if we have some disagreements, we'll solve those disagreements through those institutions. What happened just less than a couple years ago, that system was broken. Now, we knew it's going to be broken. Okay, that system was not sustainable. It was sustainable for probably half a century or maybe 80 years or something like that. That's it. In history, there's nothing that is forever. And that system was broken by a nation that decided we're going back to war cycles that used to be or characterized as wars that eliminate, burn, eliminate totally your enemies. What you and me are seeing now in Ukraine is the type of wars that characterized humanity for millennia before that. Okay? And there are a lot of reasons why Russia is doing what it's doing. We knew all the mechanisms of that kind of thinking, and we knew it's going to be that way. And by the way, we know that Russia is going to go to sleep in history for about a century. It's not going to disappear, because it sits on the most important part of Earth in which there are most actually of the resources. All right? So we are now at a stage in history in which we are rethinking that global system. Okay? And it's going to take probably another decade or 2 decades until we will come up with a different system. That system has collapsed. It's already clear to most of the people I'm at least aware of. There are a few that do not really agree that the previous system has collapsed, but at least that the global system as we knew it in the last 30, 50 years is in deep troubles. And we need to redefine what is it exactly global trade? What is it exactly global institutions? At this time in history, there are competing ideas about that kind of order, world global order. And I'm going to show you how 2 nations are competing about those ideas. And now that kind of competition, by the way, in history, at the beginning it is in a subconscious state. We are not aware of that kind of competition. It takes time until it comes, to be clear to a lot of people. And then we start thinking about solutions so that the negative outcomes of those ideas will not be so devastating. Okay? By the way, Germany is going to be probably the symbol how the global order, the way they understood global order, the previous global order, was devastating for them. And a lot of people are thinking that Germany is going to go through very hard times in order to adjust to the new global order, which is probably some of you are familiar with the term of what Bucci just mentioned, the glocal idea, okay? There is no more globalization, total global thinking, okay? We are now at the stage in which we are reorganizing in clusters. And those clusters are thinking about different types of ideas of globalizations. And this is what I'm going to try and explain as much as I can. All right? Briefly, just to make sense of what was so great about the last 80 years in human history. This is how globalization looked like exactly 50 years ago. Okay? The more it's dark, the more you were global at that time. And the less, of course, you were barely managing yourself as a local, sustainable economy. Now, if you take a look just 50 years in time, you see what happened in humanity. So you and me have gone through an amazing period of time in human history, in which in a matter of 30 years, 50 years, we went from being totally rural, totally dependent on agriculture or fishing or whatever, into being global superpowers. You know, think about India, think about Israel. In a matter of 50 years, from nothing to a regional superpower. And India is about to be a global superpower in a matter of nothing. There was no such a thing in human history. And there are negative outcomes to that growth. Let me be very clear up front, okay? At the moment, we think about only the best and the positive aspects of that growth. So, saying that, if you can see here, the nations that benefited most of globalization, or the way we defined globalization in the last 50 or 80 years, if you wish. Okay? India is clearly has benefited in a manner that not many nations have benefited in the last 50 years. All right, now let's go to the challenges of the new order that is emerging. Now, at this point of time, It's not an easy thing to define exactly the new order. There are a lot of players in that competition of ideas. And it will be very hard to predict the exact manner of globalization that we're going to see in the next 2 decades. But at least we need to try and see how dots are emerging and try to trace those dots into some kind of a picture that will help us maneuvering the map of the next 2-3 decades. And the more we see clearer things, the more we have a clearer picture, the more it will be easier for us to maneuver a lot of challenges that are going to happen, because the way we thought things needs to evolve, the way we thought things needs to be shaped, not anymore, probably not anymore. So let's see how China is challenging the new world order, okay, or the old order actually. Okay, as you know, you are all familiar with the Malacca Strait. It's one of the choke points that is going to change world order. Okay, everything passes almost over there, from east to west. As you see here, trade, Chinese maritime trade, Japanese global maritime, a lot of trade is passing through a very narrow strait through Malacca. And that strait is the source of fear for a lot of nations. Okay? Most of the nations that are fearing that strait are, of course, sitting nearby that strait. India also is part of those fears. But let me show you how China is looking at the world from that perspective, in order to understand what they're doing, and in order to understand what India is already doing and what India probably will do in order to reflect or address those challenges. All right? So you see, despite a lot of resources also in China, China is a phenomenon in human history. In a matter of only 50 years or 60 years, if you wish, depends where you start thinking, it went from nothing, from hunger of millions of people that die, to be a challenging superpower, world superpower. There is no such a thing in human history, as far as we know, not in such a very short time frame. You go from that point to that point. The outcome is that it is hungry for a lot of resources. Of course, the most important resource of the time is energy, and it needs 80% of its energy resources to bring from outside of China. Through where? Of course, through a lot of choke points. And without the ability to go through those choke points, they will have to circumvent Earth in order to bring resources, to sell things, to trade, etc. It will be devastating to their economy. And of course, it will be devastating to world economy, because everything will skyrocket in price. So what they do, they have a geo-strategy that they have built in the last decade. Okay? It took a lot of other nations to realize what's happening, something like 5-6 years. But in the last 5 years, everybody is awakening to that strategy. I'm going to define it, as short as possible in a few minutes. The first thing they are doing, and it's very, very important to India, is what we call the South China Sea. Okay, this is how the UN has divided the maritime geography for different nations. However, what China has done, you are all familiar, is taking over actually the South China Sea without any permission, without any international agreements, etc., which also reflects how world order has collapsed in the last 5, 10 years. All right? And they are doing it basically based on the fear that somebody somehow in the near future will blockade the Malacca Strait. And energy will not be able to flow from Middle East to China, etc. And back and forth. Trade will be very, very expensive in order to circumvent that Malacca Strait. What they have done is not only take over just with words that South China Sea. They actually have built 7 islands on that South China Sea. Those islands became military strategic spots that probably, if they will need to open that blockade in the Malacca Strait, they will be very important in that campaign they are already building. There are already some news that those islands are already collapsing, but it doesn't matter. This is the strategy. And let me clarify, even though you have a strategy, you always need to think that that strategy will not work. Okay? If you are to be successful in any kind of strategy, make sure that you have always a few strategies. And I'm going to show you how India is having a very broad and variety of strategies. Nobody knows what will work now, but at least India is developing those strategies. And how, of course, they are going very well with how Israel fits into those strategies. Okay, you see here just one example of an island, but there are 7 islands that they have already put over there with a lot of military equipment and etc. Now, there are other choke points worldwide, and those choke points are clearly very important to world trade and world dominance and world policing and world ability to have your needs coming whenever you need, of course, in a global, in a new kind of a global order. Okay, you see those choke points. Okay, now China is taking over some of the choke points. India is also taking some of the choke points. We are at a point in history in which everybody is trying to take over as much as possible sea routes, sea spots, land spots that will be strategic in a manner that the flow of resources will be able to continue as smoothly as possible in the new order that is emerging. Okay, the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, you can see, I believe, all of you, how things are evolving. Now, let me show you another strategy that China is trying. You are all familiar with the new Silk Road, but something else is happening. We know that the most devastating element of China is that they don't have enough water for their industrialization, their ability to continue producing so many things and selling them worldwide. Without war, it's impossible. And you in India are familiar with that issue in the north. What I would like to make sure that you are familiar with is that one of the strategies of China in the future is to take over. Take over. Otherwise, they won't be able to make it. Take over the southern part of Russia. Okay? So if we are to think about future conflicts, pay attention to that southern part of Russia, because on that southern part of Russia, there is a lot of water, and they will have to take over that place in order to survive, in order to somehow to make it and continue their industrialization. The other strategy, of course, is, if you wish, trying to circumvent the world in manners that humanity was never able to do through the northern pole. We know that the more probably seas are getting more, if you wish, hotter, then there will be times in which we will be able to do maritime trade also through the pole, and this is an amazing and even frightening strategy of China. They are already speaking about it now out loud, but I don't think it will be able to be materialized, at least in the next 3 decades. And the next 3 decades are the most important thing to think about. Now, let me go to what we know, at least at this point, the dream of world order as China has at least spoken about in the last decade. And we need to always make attention to how people are speaking. Many times, we don't pay attention how people are speaking. We think, they are just, imagining things. But this is not imagination. This is what we call the first line, the first island China line. Their goal is by 2030, take over that line. Without that line, they are so frightened that somehow somebody will be able to blockade them, and they will not be able to bring resources and not be able, of course, to trade with the world. The South China Sea is just a very small part of that line. This is why Taiwan is crucial. Without Taiwan, they won't be able to be free and trade through waters. As you know, waters are the most important routes that humanity can use in order to make things very cheap and very available to everybody worldwide. You don't have to pave, you don't have to do anything. You just, put a cargo on a vessel, and it can go wherever that vessel can go on the seas. Without Taiwan, they are in trouble. Without South Japan, they are in trouble, and that's why they also are taking some islands in South Japan. Okay? So if you see, we can already trace the conflicts and the points of conflicts that are going to shape and to be part of our daily news in the next 2-3 decades. But this is only the first line. Okay? The other line, which is probably frightening to many people, okay, is that by 2050, they will be able to take over, if you see, the second island chain, in which they will be free to trade with everybody worldwide and take over, by 2050, take over the policing role that the US has been doing in the last at least 80 years. Okay? And if you are the one that is policing the maritime routes, you have great power. You are much more able to do, national interest in matters that, you cannot do if there is another person or another nation that is policing and is defining the order, is defining the rules of world institutes, etc., etc. But this is not the end. This is what everybody is fearing, okay? The third island chain. And if you see, there are patterns that are re-emerging time after time in human history. Time after time. Not exactly in the same way, but at least you can see that humanity is constantly competing on maritime trade routes already for millennia. And it's only another, another phase in history with different technologies, different nations that are taking roles in that competition, etc., etc. And what really is something that we need to put in mind is that the world order that used to be in the last 80 years, that everybody will be able, to trade, everybody will be able to sign treaties, everybody will be able to use the resources. It's only a matter of economic, goods and economic interest, and everybody will prosper. That era in human history, I say, probably is over, and now we are trying to redefine it in a different way. And here I'm going to clarify the role of India in that competition. Okay, by the way, by 2070, if you see, they would like to take over the Indian Ocean too, because the Indian Ocean is clearly the jewel of human trade for millennia. And the reason is because most of humanity is concentrated in around what you see, the Indian Ocean and a little bit the South China Sea, but this is the core. This is the core of human existence. And it was always the jewel of the jewel, and this is the end point of China. Now, some experts are saying there's no way they will be able to do it. Some experts are saying they might. And if they are going to be able to do it, world order is going to go up in upheaval, because this is a very different mindset that we need to be acquainted with. It's a very different ideas of globalization, of trade, the kinds of goods, the kinds of communication, everything is going to be different, at least as we have seen it up to now. Now let's see how the US is going to address these strategic challenges of China. And you and Israel are part of that strategy, and we better understand it, because if you don't understand it, then you might do some great mistakes. And mistakes we are all constantly doing, but if you do so a grave mistake, that might be with a lot of consequences. Okay, and you are all familiar with that, encroachment of alliances around China. As you see, the US is investing billions of dollars on that encroachment, which is very important, the term of encroachment. You are all familiar with the pact, okay, the ANZUS, with the Quad, with the Five Eyes. We are at the early stage of reorganizing clusters of nations in order to address that Chinese challenge. And you are all familiar with it, okay? You are part of it. You are taking a very important role. But let me show you the nuance of the Indian strategies. It's very different than the nuance of the American strategy. And it fits very well with the nuance of the Israeli strategy. This is the first thing, okay? The US is reorganizing world economic infrastructures, if you wish. Okay? They are trying to somehow, even though a little bit late, do as what the Chinese were doing in the last decade or so. Okay? Organizing, putting a lot of money, investing in different nations so that they will stick together and they will stay under the umbrella of the US as a superpower and as a world order policeman. That's one thing. There is another one, which is called the IPEFP, okay, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. You are the core of that agreement, and there will be a lot of flow of resources and money in order to sustain and keep India in the umbrella, under the umbrella of at least the new world order, which is not an easy thing to do. Okay, India has its emphasis, has its needs, and it's not exactly, you know, something that is easy to if you wish, to impose on ideas. But this, you're going to benefit from it a lot if you are aware of it and if you are aware of focus of the details. Now let me go into the Indian strategies. Here, what I see is something really unusual. There are a lot of strategies, which is good. But there is also, you know, another aspect to having a lot of strategies. Sometimes you don't know exactly on which strategy to put all your efforts. So let me first, you know, a little bit elaborate on the different strategies. Yeah, I believe you are all familiar exactly with the dot, but I'm going to give it some, at least a picture or a meaning. Okay, you are probably familiar with the necklace strategy around China, having different ports, different places that India is buying, India is investing on, in order to keep as much as possible ports around China. Okay, it's not easy to do. It's not working always well. It's not, you know, easy to manage, but still, it's a strategy, and it's a very good strategy, even though some experts are saying it's too large. So let's see what other things India is doing. Of course, securing world trade. India is not in Malacca Strait, but it has a very important place around Malacca, and they are strengthening militarily, at least, that Nicobar and Andaman Strait of Islands. And here comes, of course, the military issue and relationships with different nations, with different technologies, because it's not only nations. You have to be part of clusters, new clusters that can provide you with technologies that you can rely upon. It's not just how many technologies you have. We know that there are technologies that are not reliable. Okay, and we are all familiar with what's happening now in Russia. And a lot of experts are also saying that a lot of technologies in China are just fake. Okay, so you have to be very careful what kind of technologies you choose in order to somehow, you know, sustain your strategy. The other thing, of course, is the Indian Ocean. As you see, you know, the trade through Malacca Strait goes to Iran, goes to Europe, goes to a lot of things, and India is now investing a lot in those ports in order to have a foot on choke points in a time in which you will have to rely on those ports in order to bring your needs, your resources, in order to bring your products to world markets, etc., etc. This is a heavy-duty work, and I believe Adani is doing a great role in that strategy. I hope I hope that you'll have a lot of other options, a lot of other opportunities, and I can foresee very easily that in 20 years from now, Adani will be at least tripling itself in terms of opportunities, etc., because of what's happening worldwide. Everybody is happy, and that's good. Okay? That's one thing. This is the most challenging issue I would like to stress. Okay? India has a very different vision of the new world order than China and then the US, which is beautiful. What India needs to do, at least from my point of view, as a person that studies vectors and their possibilities and their, of course, cons and pros, is that India is looking somehow to bypass one of the most important choke points, which is the Suez Canal, through the Persian corridor. Now, it brings a lot of troubles because India wants to stick with Russia. India doesn't want to take, a side in this global issue. But it's not just a side. India has a very different, at least from my point of view, a different vision, which is what we call the multipolar world. Okay, there is the unipolar world and there is the multipolar world. Now, the US was a unipolar world in the last 30 years since the USSR has collapsed. It's not good. Historically, that's not good. It's not good for the US, it's not good for the world, it's not good for anybody else. India has the idea of a multipolar world. Now, Russia wanted also to have a multipolar world. Russia said there are three great nations in the 21st century: the US, Russia, and China. So let's be a multipolar world. Let's share things. Let's compete. Nobody will be so dominant as you used to be in the last 30 years. By the way, nobody has conceived that the USSR will collapse so fast. That's not a good thing that happened in human history. It's not a good thing, okay? Of course, the US didn't even think about it, and there are a lot of negative outcomes to that collapse. Worldwide, of course, what we see here is an attempt to bring itself again to world stage, but they are doing so many mistakes. Most of the experts are saying they are going to go to sleep at least a century, like Turkey. It took Turkey a century to recover and become again somehow a regional power, at least in the Middle East. India is looking to build that visionary idea of the corridor, okay, the Iran-India, Russia-Iran-India corridor to bypass the Suez Canal. If India will be able to do it, and through that route, which is 7,000 kilometers, that's a lot of challenges, a lot of opportunities. But if India will be able to do it with Iran and Moscow, they will be able to build a multipolar world in which nobody is dominant and each nation has few options to operate. Now, as you see, these are great challenges strategically, not just strategically, but also economically. And of course, you need a great human power. You need a lot of ideas and new technologies in order to at least say that we were somehow successful in such a strategy. It brings a lot of stress between India and the US, and India and Europe, and India and Israel, and India in China. With China, a lot of stress. But this is one of the most promising route for a human being in the 22nd century. Because what humans are trying to do in the 21st century is to enlarge as much as possible the choke points that exist on Earth, so that nobody will be able to take over any choke point. And if somebody will take over a choke point, there will be other choke points, and trade and ideas will flow in a much smoother way than it used to be in the at least until the 20th century. Okay, there are a lot of choke points worldwide. I'm just concentrating now in this area, but there are a lot. Another choke point which is crucial to the world is the Panama Canal, and the idea is to cut through South America and connect the two oceans in ways that nobody will be able to, close the Panama Canal, and you won't be able to trade and bring resources from place to place, and you'll have to circumvent all South America. So there are a lot of choke points. I don't have time, to go on each choke point. There are choke points that can circumvent Malacca Strait. The Chinese are working on it. I know that some people in India are also working on other choke points nearby the Malacca Canal, but this is probably the most important achievement of humanity in the 21st century. Eliminating choke points on Earth, which will make the 22nd century an amazing century without, dominant superpowers, with a flow of goods and resources and ideas without anybody even thinking of blockading anyone else. And we are at the beginning of that trend that will take a century. But if you are aware of that trend and you take a role on that trend, not just, buying ports in different ways, in different places, but opening choke points, building new choke points on Earth. And we are in a global thinking. We can bring a lot of resources, we can bring a lot of ideas, a lot of technologies to really carve Earth in a different way. And this is probably will be the greatest achievement of the 21st century. And it is built upon the fears of great nations again. As usual, okay? Those fears are driving us to compete, to be cruel to each other, but it drives us to open and to make our Earth much more navigable, much more smoother to walk and drive and, of course, maneuver and seas, land, skies, everything. Now, this will bring some tension because this is really a game changer, okay? And it's a game changer that has some negative applications, okay? The most negative applications, of course, is Iran, okay? And Iran is troubles because, of course, of a very specific, let's say, rulers at this time in history. It will always change. I don't worry about it. I know that it will change. There is nothing that is permanent in history. Nothing is permanent in history. If there is something that is permanent, is that nothing is permanent. This is a very nice saying of futurists. Okay? But if you see, this is what we are trying to do at the beginning of the 21st century. India is trying to do other strategies, as you see, which is called the India's Neighbors First strategy, trying first of all, to connect dots around India, which is much easier, even though you have troubles in different places. But that can be manageable locally and you don't need, great powers to be part of it. But it's a very good strategy. Actually, this is a strategy that can be achieved very easily. There's another strategy which is very hard to achieve, is what we call the India-Africa strategy, to send trade routes to Africa. Africa is a very difficult place to manage at this time in history, but the more we progress in the 21st century, Africa, for a lot of experts, is going to emerge again as a power, a world power, like any other place. There are ups and downs in history. There's nothing, again, is permanent. And India is looking to put those dots on ports. Again, ports are very important. They used to be always very important. Some people thought at the end of the 20th century that there is no importance to Earth, to borders. We are in a global, world. And Fukuyama even said, this is the end of history, which he became already a joke within the futurist community. All right. This is something I really like. One of this Indian strategy that I really, really think is amazing even to think about, okay, which is called the Global South. The idea is to organize the southern nations that are still in different levels of development, okay? The South, we know, was not the emphasis of policies in the 20th century. The 20th century was more in recovering from World War and bringing the West and the East into the 21st century. The South has been ignored. And India is willing to take the role to be the leader of southern nations, which might be really very important to humanity. At this point in time, there are about 8 billion people worldwide. Out of those 8 billion people, around 4 billion are still in poverty. And most of them are concentrated in the southern hemisphere of Earth. If you will bring, in a matter of 3 decades, let's say, many of those southern nations, many of those 4 billion people to be middle class, that will be an amazing achievement for humanity. It will take us another 50 years until there won't be poverty worldwide. Now, in future studies, there is a very nice study that organized the most challenging issues of humanity in a hierarchy. And the idea was to put them in an order so that our leaders worldwide will know the best ROI for the efforts of humanity. The first thing that appeared in that study is poverty. If you eliminate poverty, in a matter of very few decades, people are becoming creative, people are becoming healthy, everything. By the way, there is another study. If you want to eliminate poverty, how do you start? And that study says dental treatment. If you treat dental issues in early age as much as possible, you are having ROI, which is amazing in terms of taking out people from poverty. Those kind of studies are very nice, to be aware of. By the way, this is one of the reasons in Israel, dental treatments are free from, I think, 2-year-old or something like that. Until 2-year-old, you don't have teeth in any way, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so this is, I believe, the most important thing that India can do. Now, how everything links to what I have just said and Israel, let me run a little bit because I don't have time. You are part of it. I believe, the higher echelon is aware of it. You are part of a larger world strategy that has a lot of benefits and has a lot of still opportunities in the future. Okay? As you all know, you have already taken another seaport on this earth in Israel, which is very important. And that thing, here, everything is nice. Okay? All right, this is the port, yeah, of course. This is strategic thinking. This is not just economic thinking. This is strategic thinking. And it is so crucial because if you really want to open Earth to transport, to circumvent those choke points, this is a very important small thing that you do and has great impact. And just to make sure that you understand what I mean, it's part of a larger strategy that we believe the US is behind it. The US is behind also the effort to bring Israel and Saudi Arabia together. And the idea is, of course, to open the choke points of Bab el-Mandeb and the Suez Canal so that you'll be able to transport goods to Europe without being concerned that somebody will close those choke points. And believe me, those choke points will be closed from time to time in the 21st century. There are still conflicts that are going on, and the 21st century has its calamities. We have been in amazing 80 years in human history that everything has bloomed because of this simple idea, which is called global policing. We have eliminated a lot of troubles that used to plug humanity in seas, in lands, in a lot of things by a single superpower that is policing those trade routes. Now we are on a second phase to that order. Opening choke points as much as we can. Great opportunities. Great opportunities for humankind. But you have to always be careful that not everyone really understands what you're doing. Not everyone really agrees that you will open those choke points and circumvent those choke points. And from time to time, when they'll see that you're succeeding, before they lose a card, they will be using that card. And the most frightening thing is not just Malacca Strait, it's Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The most frightening. Okay? So this is part of a larger strategy that I believe is going to have great fruits for Israel, for India, for the world, for Europe, and balance things back in the 21st century because we are out of balance in the last decade. Out of balance, and that out of balance, a lot of nations are going to suffer. Mostly southern nations and developing nations. Prices will be skyrocketing. They won't have food. I'm just thinking how Egypt is going to suffer from what's happening now in Ukraine. And from the scorching land that the Russians are doing. a lot of nations in Africa are going to suffer. So we need to bring a lot of things to those nations in order to bring down tensions between them. Otherwise, we might see devastating wars in the 21st century too. And the wars of the 21st century are not the wars of the 18th century, 19th century, not even 20th century. They might be much more devastating because we have tools that are frightening. Those tools used to be in the hands of nations, of great and very responsible leaders. Those tools now are in the hands of individuals. They can bring havoc without even thinking. Anyway, I'm very, very optimistic about humanity in the 21st century. It's always coming with challenges. The more you connect dots, the more you understand what's the driving force of humanity, the more you know how to seize opportunities and avoid as much as possible conflict points and conflict tension. I hope I was able a little bit, to somehow clarify those dots. I believe I didn't say anything new, but I was trying to give it some new sense, new picture, whatever, as you wish. And if you have any questions, do we have time for questions? Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pasik.
There's no such a thing as Sashim. He was a great assistant to me coming here.
Sure. And we look forward to have you again. And now I understand why you said that you need at least 5 hours. I mean, I was standing here, I could hear you for the entire day. And now it's the time for raising questions. In the interest of time, may I request that our colleagues here raise their hands first, and my request to the volunteers is to pass on the mic. I have the first hand raised here. May I request the volunteer to pass on the mic here, please, first. The gentleman in the first row. Yeah, please hand over the mic. And then to the gentleman in the second row.
Please ask, easily. I have a hard time understanding.
I'll try and I'll be easy here. I think you reflected a lot on the trade routes between different nations. I think in the last 100 years, energy and oil, as you explained, played a key role in how these trade routes were formed and where the manufacturing happened and where the end supply and consumption happened. With the net zero being imminently given in 2050, 2070 time frame, let's hope for it. Energy pattern will change. A lot of localized manufacturing could happen because the energy will be distributed across the world. How do you see that changing the way the defense mechanism will work? And a second question is, how do you see the interplay between digital and physical trades? Because a lot of this AI, which is coming along, will essentially mean that a lot of manufacturing and product creation could happen in a very localized manner.
Well, the first question is 5 hours. The second question, 10 hours. Anyway, I'll try. Very simple, okay? In a very simple way, it will take humanity at least another 150 years to reach net zero stage. Okay, let's be very clear. I believe that a lot of people are dreaming, which is a beautiful dream, okay? Humanity still has a long way to go in order to reach that point, all right? So I'm not speaking about even a century from now. I'm speaking about 30 years from now. 30 years from now, the blood of civilization, as it used to be for millennia, is energy. At this point in history, it's oil, gas, and it's all, outcomes. This is a given, and we better understand it. It doesn't say that we don't have to go into a lot of efforts to start that trend of reaching a point in which we will not use anymore those fossil resources. We will reach it in human history, okay? But not in the first half of the 21st century, not even in the second half of the 21st century. We will have 10%, 20%, but still, it's not 100%, okay? And humanity now is 8 billion. In 30 years, it's around 9.5 billion people. And we are energy hungry, constantly consuming more and more and more energy. So let's not, dream and be, detached from reality. That's one part. And I'm really summarizing tons of literature that is just now emerging to the awareness of other people. The other question is how the digital world, and more specifically AI, is going to change everything we know. This is somehow that was your question, isn't it? Well, let me give you some perspective, okay? A lot of people are afraid, a lot of people are thrilled about AI. I'm not. And the reason is the following. We as a species never, by the way, we are called Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens was born about 250,000 years. We are the 6th variant of Homo sapiens. We emerged in evolution only about 12,000 years ago. The other 5 variants disappeared. By the way, we also almost disappeared around 60,000 years ago. There were left only 10,000 people like you and me 10,000 years ago. And somehow we managed, to survive. All right, okay? What really defines Homo sapiens is the following. We do not accept our physical constraints. Which means I don't like it that this is what I can do. I want to jump. I want to run. So at the beginning, we invented a wheel. Now stretch it in time, and we invented wings. Okay, in the 20th century, we said, that's not enough. I don't accept my memory constraints. So we developed technologies that can memorize better than our mind, analyze better than our mind, retrieve better than our minds, and we did amazing things. We are at a stage in history in which we say we would like to enlarge our ability to think, okay? Which is intelligence. By the way, the definition of intelligence is the ability to see patterns. This is what our mind is constantly doing. We are looking at patterns. We are watching if there are patterns, and we're using those patterns to foresee next stages of different things in order to make our life better. Okay? To foresee, patterns of the economy or everything. All right? This is what makes you and me so unique in evolution. Being able to imagine patterns. By the way, not only imagining patterns, what science have been doing in the last 300 years is validate those patterns if they are really true or not. And how true are those patterns, which is what we call validation in science. Not everything that we see is real. Not every pattern we perceive are real. Our mind is just geared to connect dots. I don't think that what I have been speaking about today is real. Our mind, is looking constantly to trace and develop patterns. Our technologies now are at a stage in which we have collected tons of data. And we are starting to look at those immense, databases to see if there are patterns we couldn't see. We call it intelligence. Actually, that's not intelligence. Because what really defines human being is not the ability to see patterns. Would you like to try what really makes us so unique in evolution? Can you try? One word. Consciousness. The fact that I know that I know. So simple. That's what makes us so unique in evolution. And we barely started even defining what consciousness is. So we are going to let our technologies do a lot of work for us. It's like, coming here, a lot of people still, when you land, are clapping their hands. They don't know that the pilot did not land that airplane. On the contrary, if I were to know that the pilot will land, I will not go to that airplane. Technologies are doing it better than each one of us. So we will let our technologies do a lot of things. And we will start concentrating, defining, developing what is really so unique as, so unique on this species. It's a very long route. We are just at the beginning of that route. We are only 12,000 years on Earth. It's nothing if you see the context. The context is that, as far as we know, say, scientifically, the Big Bang happened what? 13 point, what? No. Big Bang. The Big Bang, 13.8 billion years ago. Our solar system, solar, not just our galaxy. Our solar system, 4.5 billion years. The first humanate, okay, this thing, between 6 to 8 million years only. We, as a species, 250,000 years, but we, as a variant of that species, only 10, 12,000 years. We barely started evolution. This is not, the crown of the jewel of evolution. I don't know about you, I know it myself, okay? Okay, this is just the beginning of something huge. It's maybe an infinite journey. And each time we will be afraid. I'm thinking how people were afraid when they invented the wheel. Probably everybody was saying, now that's it, we're going to die. We're going to break our heads, our legs, And then we developed, nuclear power. Oh my God, this is the end of the universe. That's it. We are a frightened species, which is good. By the way, this is the key to survival. Not being, courageous. Go ahead.
Sorry,
I can go on, but that's it. Okay.
We have one more question from Shishiji.
David, my name is Shishir. And it's been such a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you so much.
I've spent 25 years in the World Trade Organization, and a lot of what you've said will probably require at least 5 hours on my part. So I'll keep that for later. But 2 points I wanted to make, David. You're very right. The old global order is changing. And probably the Russia-Ukraine war is what you see as the visible catalyst. But I think there were 2 points which probably happened earlier, and you may like to incorporate them into your thought process. The World Trade Organization, as the symbol of globalization, was largely set up when the world was bipolar, the United States and the European Union. In about 10 years of setting up of the WTO, it had already started becoming multipolar. But the bipolar parties were not ready to accept the transition of an organization from bipolar to multipolar. And the first seeds or the first nail of probably what has led now to the changing global order was actually planted by the United States, which stopped the policing of the World Trade Organization by saying, no, we do not want any more appellate body members. Just one.
And the reason was because other nations
were fighting, were winning.
took advantage of that policing investment.
David, the second point I make, when I saw your blurb as a futurist, I hope I was in a minority, but I thought maybe I was going to hear something in the sequel of, both Aldous Huxley and George Orwell. But in spite of that, I do detect a similarity, and I'm sure you've, 1984, you would have as much read as I have. 1984 talks about this large poster in front of the Interior Ministry which says, war is peace. And what you have kind of explained so beautifully today, I think really shows that 100 years later, it's going to be economic control which will lead to growth and development. And I think, the other difference between those books and what you've said is, those books were slightly dark, kind of predicted a future which wasn't very positive. Whereas your closing words were this belief in humanity. Exactly. And I think that belief in humanity linked to India being a global leader of the global south is, I think, where the Adani Group would also hugely come in. Because what I see 10 years down the line is nations and entities merging much more into one. If India wants to kind of profess any of those strategies, they will need entities which are into infrastructure, which are into logistics. So thanks, really. Brilliant.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Really, this is a beautiful, anecdote. And I'm very optimistic because I truly believe in humankind. And human kindness, not just humankind. There will be always, atrocities and always, but we are driven to bring good. So from time to time, we are also cruel. That's right. That's only from time to time. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Professor Pasik. And while we were planning for this event and thinking about what we could do to start preparing and possibly give you as a small memento from our side, we thought what could be better than running a small contest amongst our employees to think about social, education and technology trends, which is a subject you speak about. And I'm excited to see there are 6,000 views on the contest which was launched by my CBC colleague. And there are 45 entries which came. And the contest led to selection of 3 top participants whose post got the maximum likes. So I thought it's just...
Are you sure they didn't buy those likes?
I thought it's just appropriate for us to call them on stage as Windows to Naya Bharat ambassadors and personally pass on a small memento from our side through you. So may I request the 3 contest winners to please come on stage, Abhinav, Arpit and Shyam. Let's clap, let's give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.
If you're looking to do a PhD in Israel, let me know. All right, t-shirt, thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Just stay back for a group picture.
Oh, you want? Oh, stay here. Stay here.
Please come.
All right. What's your name? All right. Thank you. Oh, no, this one. Thank you.
So the picture with you standing in the middle.
All right.
Probably you can move in the middle, please.
There is no middle here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jensen.
And come on the stage to pass a small token of our love to the speakers. Could we have that, please? Just come in the center. Can I request Dr. Ron,
Thank you.
please come. Mr. Butsi, please, could you come?
Now the three of us. Hold three. Thank you. Now it's you in the middle.
Let me make it middle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you once again. Thank you.